Right now, XRP sits as the fourth largest cryptocurrency on the planet with a market cap above $90 billion. 7 spot ETFs trade on American exchanges. Ripple, the company behind XRP, just received conditional approval to operate a federally supervised trust bank. And on March 17, 2026, the SEC and CFTC jointly classified XRP as a digital commodity. But none of that happened overnight. The real story of XRP stretches back over 2 decades, long before Bitcoin even existed. And the path from a small community payment experiment in Vancouver to one of the most consequential digital assets in global finance is filled with internal betrayals, billion-dollar lawsuits, a co-founder who sold 9 billion tokens over 8 years, and a technology that refused to die no matter how many times people counted it out. Most people who hold XRP know the surface-level story. They know Ripple. They know about the SEC lawsuit. But very few people understand the full picture. Every decision, every turning point, and every hidden detail that brought XRP to where it is right now. That is exactly what this video covers. We are going from 2004 all the way to today, March 2026. By the time this video ends, you will understand XRP on a level that puts you ahead of 99% of the people in this space. Let us start at the very beginning. The year is 2004. Facebook has just launched. YouTube does not exist yet. Bitcoin is still 5 years away from being invented. And in Vancouver, Canada, a web developer named Ryan Fugger is working on an idea that, at the time, sounds almost too simple to matter. Fugger wants to build a system where ordinary people can create their own credit and exchange value directly with each other. No banks, no financial intermediaries, just people who trust each other, sending and receiving value through a shared digital ledger. He calls the project RipplePay. RipplePay is not a cryptocurrency. There are no tokens, there is no blockchain, there is no mining. It is a peer-to-peer payment platform that tracks balances between people, like an IOU system between friends or neighbors, except it runs online and can chain together multiple trust relationships so that strangers can transact through mutual connections. The idea sounds modest, but at its core, RipplePay introduces a concept that will become the foundation for everything that follows. It proposes a decentralized network for exchanging value that does not depend on traditional banks. In 2004, that idea is radical. Most people are barely comfortable using PayPal. Online banking is still in its early stages. The notion that you could build a financial network where trust flows between individuals instead of being imposed by institutions is years ahead of its time. Here is how RipplePay works in practice. Say, Alice trusts Bob, and Bob trusts Carol. Alice wants to send $10 to Carol, but Alice and Carol do not know each other. Through RipplePay, Alice can send the payment through Bob. Alice's balance with Bob decreases by $10. Bob's balance with Carol decreases by $10. Carol receives the value. No bank is involved. The trust chain handles everything. The system has obvious limitations. It requires pre-existing trust relationships. It does not scale well beyond small communities, and it has no currency of its own. But the underlying architecture, a network where value can flow through chains of trust without a central authority, is the conceptual blueprint for what eventually becomes the XRP ledger. RipplePay runs quietly for years. It never gains mass adoption. It remains a small, experimental project, used mostly by a handful of people in Fugger's own community. But the concept plants a seed. And in 2012, when a group of engineers approaches Fugger with a much more ambitious proposal, he agrees to hand over the project. The RipplePay concept will be absorbed into something far bigger, Fast forward to 2011. Bitcoin has been live for about 2 years. It is gaining attention in technical circles. A small but growing community believes Bitcoin could change the financial system forever. But not everyone in that community thinks Bitcoin got it right. 3 engineers in particular are paying close attention to Bitcoin's limitations. Their names are David Schwartz, Jed McCaleb, and Arthur Britto. Schwartz is a cryptography expert. McCaleb is already known in the crypto space. He created the file-sharing platform eDonkey and later founded Mt. Gox, the first major Bitcoin exchange, which he sold in 2011 before its infamous collapse. Britto is a software developer with deep knowledge of distributed systems. These 3 look at Bitcoin and see a technology with enormous potential, but equally enormous flaws. Bitcoin transactions are slow. The network can handle only a handful of transactions per second. And worst of all, the proof-of-work mining system that secures Bitcoin consumes massive amounts of electricity. By 2019, estimates suggest that Bitcoin mining uses more energy than the entire country of Portugal. Schwartz, McCaleb, and Britto believe they can build something better. Not a copy of Bitcoin, but a completely new system, built from scratch, that keeps the core idea of a decentralized digital ledger but removes the need for mining entirely. In May 2011, Schwartz writes a forum post with the working title, "Bitcoin Without Mining." It is a simple idea with massive implications. Can you create a digital currency system that achieves consensus without burning enormous amounts of energy? The 3 engineers get to work. They begin designing what they call the Ripple Consensus Ledger, a distributed ledger that uses a system of trusted validators to agree on transactions instead of miners competing to solve mathematical puzzles. Their design uses something called the Federated Consensus Mechanism. Instead of proof of work, the network relies on a set of independent servers called validators. These validators come to agreement on which transactions are valid through multiple rounds of voting. For a transaction to be confirmed, at least 80% of validators must agree. Transactions settle in 3 to 5 seconds. Fees are a fraction of a cent, and the entire system can handle far more transactions per second than Bitcoin or Ethereum. By June 2012, the code is complete. The XRP ledger is live. When the XRP ledger launches, all 100 billion XRP tokens are created at once. There is no mining. There will never be any mining. The total supply is fixed from day one. This is a deliberate design choice. Unlike Bitcoin, where new coins enter circulation slowly through mining rewards over more than a century, XRP's entire supply exists from the moment the ledger goes live. Of those 100 billion tokens, 20 billion are distributed among the 3 creators, Schwartz, McCaleb, and Britto. The remaining 80 billion are set aside for a new company that will be formed to carry this technology forward. That company launches in September 2012 under the name NewCoin. It is quickly renamed OpenCoin. The co-founders are Chris Larson, an entrepreneur with a background in fintech who had previously co-founded eLoan, and Jed McCaleb. David Schwartz takes the role of Chief Cryptography Officer, and Arthur Britto serves as an advisor. Before OpenCoin can move forward, McCaleb and Larson approach Ryan Fugger about the original RipplePay project. After discussions with the RipplePay community, Fugger agrees to hand over the project. The original concept of decentralized value exchange is now in the hands of a team that has the technical ability and the business ambition to take it global. The name keeps changing. OpenCoin rebrands to Ripple Labs in 2013. In 2016, it shortens to just Ripple. But the mission stays the same from the beginning. And here is where Ripple takes a path that no other crypto project at the time is willing to take. In 2012 and 2013, the dominant philosophy in crypto is that banks are the enemy. Bitcoin's entire ethos is built around replacing traditional financial institutions Decentralization means cutting out the middlemen. Ripple takes the opposite approach. Chris Larsen, the company's first CEO, does not believe blockchain technology should be used to overthrow the existing financial system. His view, which he states openly and repeatedly, is that the most transformative innovations in history have always built on the ideas that came before them, not displaced them. Ripple's mission is to work with banks to modernize the infrastructure that global payments depend on, especially cross-border transactions, which at the time are notoriously slow and expensive. International wire transfers routinely take 3 to 5 business days to settle. They pass through multiple intermediary banks. Each intermediary adds fees. The total cost of sending money across borders runs into the tens of billions of dollars annually. At the center of this system is SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. SWIFT is not a payment system. It is a messaging network. When you send money internationally, SWIFT messages tell banks what to do, but the actual money moves through a chain of correspondent banks, each holding pre-funded accounts in different currencies. This is slow, expensive, and ties up enormous amounts of capital. Ripple wants to replace this model. Instead of pre-funding accounts around the world, Ripple envisions a system where XRP serves as a bridge currency. A bank in the United States sends dollars. Those dollars are converted to XRP in seconds, transferred to the destination country, and converted to the local currency. Settlement happens in under 5 seconds instead of 3 to 5 days. Costs drop by 40 to 70%. That is the pitch. And it is aimed squarely at the financial institutions that the rest of the crypto world wants to eliminate. But before Ripple can execute this vision, it has to survive its first internal crisis. In 2013, just a year after the company is founded, tensions between the co-founders start to surface. Jed McCaleb and Chris Larsen have fundamentally different visions for the project. McCaleb leans toward a more open-source, decentralized philosophy. He wants the technology to be accessible and community-driven. Larsen and others in leadership want to build enterprise-grade infrastructure that can partner with the world's largest banks. These are not small disagreements. They touch on the most basic questions about what the project should be. How much control should Ripple have over the XRP supply? How fast should the company grow? Should it prioritize decentralization or institutional adoption? By the end of 2013, the divide is too wide. McCaleb leaves the company. The departure is not clean. McCaleb holds approximately 9 billion XRP, which is 9% of the total supply. Before leaving, he announces publicly that he intends to sell all of it. That announcement alone sends a chill through the early XRP market. 9 billion tokens is an enormous amount. If McCaleb dumps them all at once, it could devastate the price. Ripple takes legal action to prevent a sudden sell-off. After extended negotiations, McCaleb signs an agreement in 2014 that restricts how much XRP he can sell over time. The limits are tied to the daily trading volume of XRP. In the early years, he can sell up to a fixed weekly amount. After 4 years, the cap rises to 1.5% of the average daily trading volume. After 6 years, it increases to 2 billion XRP per year. The result is that McCaleb spends the next 8 years methodically selling his 9 billion XRP through a wallet the crypto community nicknames Taco Stand. Aspects of XRP's history. Community members build websites to track his wallet balance in real time. Every large transaction generates headlines. McCaleb does not disappear after leaving Ripple. In 2014, he co-founds Stellar, a competing blockchain project that shares some architectural similarities with the XRP ledger, but emphasizes open access and decentralization. The philosophical split that tore Ripple apart now exists as 2 separate, competing projects in the same market, both focused on fast, cheap, cross-border payments. It is worth noting the ending of this story now. McCaleb sells his last XRP on July 16, 2022. It takes him 8 years, 1 month, and 25 days from the date he announced his intention to sell. According to crypto researcher Leonidas Hadjiloizou, McCaleb generates approximately $3.2 billion from his XRP sales and Ripple equity combined. He goes on to fund the development of a commercial space station, according to Bloomberg. Back in 2015, with McCaleb gone and Stellar launched as a competitor, Ripple faces its first regulatory test. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, fines Ripple $700,000 for violating the Bank Secrecy Act. The specific charge is that Ripple sold XRP without registering as a money services business and failed to implement adequate anti-money laundering protocols. Ripple does not fight the fine. Instead, the company enters into a remedial agreement. It agrees to enhance the anti-money laundering capabilities of the XRP protocol. It adds stricter permissioning requirements for new participants joining the network. And it registers as a money services business. This is a defining moment, but not in the way people might expect. The fine itself is small. But Ripple's response sets a pattern that will define the company for the next decade. Rather than retreating from regulators or arguing that crypto should be exempt from financial rules, Ripple leans in. It cooperates. It upgrades its compliance infrastructure. It treats the fine as a cost of doing business in the regulated financial world. In 2016, Ripple takes this strategy further by obtaining a BIT license from the New York Department of Financial Services. At the time, the BIT license is one of the most rigorous regulatory frameworks for crypto companies in the world. Most crypto startups avoid New York entirely because the licensing requirements are so demanding. Ripple's willingness to submit to this level of oversight gives it something no other crypto company has at the time: credibility with traditional financial institutions. Banks do not partner with companies that are running from regulators. They partner with companies that can pass compliance reviews, meet reporting requirements, and operate within established legal frameworks. While navigating these regulatory hurdles, Ripple is building its product suite. Between 2014 and 2016, the company develops 3 core products. The first is xCurrent. This is a messaging and settlement layer that allows banks to communicate payment details in real time. It does not require XRP. Banks can use xCurrent to confirm transactions, verify details, and process payments faster than traditional SWIFT messaging. xCurrent is essentially Ripple's foot in the door with financial institutions, a product they can adopt without any exposure to cryptocurrency. The second product is xRapid, which will later be renamed On-Demand Liquidity, or ODL. This is where XRP becomes essential. xRapid uses XRP as a bridge currency for cross-border payments. Instead of maintaining pre-funded accounts in every destination country, a financial institution can convert the sending currency into XRP, transfer it across borders in seconds, and convert it to the receiving currency on the other end. This eliminates the need for banks to park enormous amounts of capital in correspondent bank accounts around the world. The third product is xVia, a standardized interface that lets businesses and payment providers plug into Ripple's network without needing separate integrations for each destination. xVia simplifies the onboarding process and makes the network accessible to smaller players. During this same period, Ripple begins signing its first institutional partners. Fedor Bank in Germany, Cross River Bank in the United States, and Earthport, a UK-based payments network, all begin testing or implementing Ripple's technology. These partnerships are small by later standards, but they establish proof of concept. Ripple is no longer just a crypto startup with a white paper. It is a financial technology company with live products, real clients, and a growing network of banking partners. Then 2017 arrives, and everything changes. At the start of the year, XRP is trading for less than a penny. The broader crypto market is beginning to heat up, driven by the initial coin offering boom and a wave of retail investor interest. Bitcoin is climbing, Ethereum is climbing, and XRP, backed by a real company with actual banking partnerships, starts climbing too. By the middle of the year, XRP crosses 10 cents, then 20, then 50, then $1. The momentum accelerates through the fall as Ripple announces new partnerships, and the media begins covering the company's technology. By December 2017, XRP is trading above $2. By early January 2018, it reaches its peak, $3.84. In the span of 12 months, XRP rises from less than a penny to nearly $4. That is a return of over 35,000% in a single year. To put that in perspective, if you had invested $1,000 in XRP at the start of 2017, your position would have been worth over $350,000 by early January 2018. The rally is not driven by hype alone. Throughout the year, Ripple makes a series of announcements that give the price run fundamental backing. Partnerships with SBI Holdings in Japan, Qualix in Mexico, and Standard Chartered are either announced or expanded. The number of institutions testing RippleNet grows from a handful to over 100. American Express and Santander test Ripple-powered cross-border payments for business customers. But the most remarkable moment comes during a brief window around the turn of the year, when XRP overtakes Ethereum in market capitalization to become the second largest cryptocurrency in the world, behind only Bitcoin. No other altcoin, before or since, has accomplished that. XRP holds the number 2 position only briefly, but the achievement puts Ripple and its technology squarely in the global spotlight. At its peak, XRP's market cap exceeds $140 billion, making it worth more than companies like General Motors and Boeing. The trading volume on some days exceeds $10 billion. By this point, Ripple's network, which it brands as RippleNet, has dozens of institutional partners running pilot programs. These are not just test environments. Banks and remittance providers are executing real transactions and proving that the technology works. But the critics have a point too. Many banks using RippleNet are running xCurrent, the messaging product that does not require XRP. The question hanging over the market is whether the price of XRP is justified by actual utility or simply riding the same speculative wave that has lifted every crypto asset to absurd valuations. In December 2017, as XRP approaches its peak, Ripple makes a move that addresses one of the biggest criticisms of the project: the company's massive XRP holdings. Ripple locks 55 billion XRP into cryptographic escrow. The company sets up a system where 1 billion tokens are released from escrow each month. Whatever portion is not used by Ripple is returned to escrow at the end of the month. This creates a predictable, transparent schedule for how XRP enters the market. The escrow does not eliminate criticism. Skeptics note that Ripple still controls the lion's share of the total supply, even if it cannot access more than 1 billion per month. But the move does provide a level of predictability that institutional partners demand. Banks need to know that Ripple will not suddenly flood the market with tokens. On average, Ripple re-escrows about 700 million XRP per month and keeps approximately 300 million, which becomes liquid each month. This pattern holds consistently year after year. Then the crash comes. In 2018, the entire crypto market collapses. XRP falls from $3.84 to below 30 cents by the end of the year. That is a drop of over 90%. But this is not unique to XRP. Bitcoin drops over 80%. Ethereum drops over 90%. Hundreds of altcoins go to zero. The ICO bubble bursts. Projects that raised hundreds of millions of dollars disappear. The total crypto market cap falls from over $800 billion in January to under $100 billion by December. For most crypto projects, the bear market is a death sentence. Teams run out of funding, development stops, communities dissolve. The landscape is littered with abandoned white papers and dead tokens. Ripple, however, does not disappear. The company has revenue from its institutional products. It has the Escrow releasing XRP monthly, and it has a balance sheet that can sustain operations through a prolonged downturn. While most crypto companies are laying off staff or shutting down entirely, Ripple continues building. The company expands its team. It opens offices in new regions, including the Middle East and Asia Pacific. It keeps signing partnerships. It hires former government officials and financial regulators to strengthen its compliance and lobbying capabilities. The most significant development of 2018 is the commercial launch of xRapid, the product that uses XRP as a bridge currency for real-time settlement. After years of testing, xRapid begins handling live transactions. This matters because it is the first time XRP has a clear, functioning role in a commercial product. It is not just a speculative asset sitting on exchanges. It is moving real money between real financial institutions across real borders. Ripple also begins investing in companies throughout the XRP ecosystem. The company uses its XRP holdings to make strategic investments in payment companies, exchanges, and blockchain startups. This dual approach, building products internally while funding an ecosystem of external partners, becomes a core part of Ripple's growth strategy. By the end of 2018, XRP remains one of the top 3 cryptocurrencies by market cap, despite losing over 90% of its value. The bear market has separated projects with real infrastructure from those built on speculation alone. Ripple is firmly in the former category. In 2019, Ripple announces a partnership that turns heads across the industry. MoneyGram, one of the largest money transfer companies in the world, begins using Ripple's on-demand liquidity, the rebranded version of xRapid. The MoneyGram deal is a watershed. MoneyGram processes billions of dollars in remittances annually. It operates in over 200 countries, and now it is using XRP to source liquidity for cross-border transfers, eliminating the need to park capital in pre-funded accounts in destination countries. Here is how it works in practice. When a customer in the United States wants to send money to a family member in the Philippines, MoneyGram traditionally needs to maintain a pool of Philippine pesos sitting in a local bank. That capital is locked up, earning nothing, waiting to be drawn down. Multiply that across dozens of countries and you have billions of dollars in working capital tied up in pre-funded accounts around the world. With ODL, that changes. The sending currency is converted to XRP in seconds, transferred to the destination corridor, and converted to the local currency on arrival. The entire process takes under a minute. No pre-funded account is needed. The capital that would have been locked up in foreign bank accounts is freed for other uses. This is exactly the use case Ripple has been pitching since its founding. A major financial institution, one that millions of people around the world depend on for sending money to their families, is using XRP in live production environments. It is not a pilot. It is not a proof of concept. It is operational. ODL corridors begin opening across emerging markets. The Philippines, Mexico, Australia, and other countries see XRP-powered transactions flowing through MoneyGram and other partners. Transaction volumes grow steadily throughout 2019 and into 2020. The partnership with MoneyGram also involves a financial arrangement where Ripple pays MoneyGram market development fees in exchange for using XRP in its payment flows. Critics point to these payments as evidence that adoption is being subsidized rather than organic. Supporters counter that market development fees are standard in enterprise software and that the technology proves itself regardless of the commercial arrangement. But in the United States, regulatory uncertainty continues to grow. The question of whether XRP is a security under American law remains unanswered. Ripple pushes for clarity. The company meets with regulators. It publishes position papers. It hires former government officials. But the SEC gives no definitive answer. And then, on December 22nd, 2020, just days before the year ends, the hammer falls. The Securities and Exchange Commission files a formal complaint against Ripple Labs CEO Brad Garlinghouse and co-founder Chris Larsen. The charge: Ripple conducted an unregistered securities offering by selling XRP, raising more than $1.3 billion without registering the token as a security or obtaining an exemption. The SEC's argument is straightforward. Under the Howey test, a Supreme Court standard from 1946 used to determine whether something qualifies as a security, XRP meets all the criteria. Investors bought XRP with the expectation of profit. That profit was expected to come from the efforts of Ripple, the company behind it. Therefore, according to the SEC, XRP is a security, and every sale of XRP by Ripple, stretching back to the company's earliest days, was illegal. The impact is immediate and devastating. XRP's price drops sharply. Within days, it falls below 20 cents. US-based exchanges react swiftly. Coinbase suspends XRP trading for American customers. Kraken, Bitstamp, and numerous other platforms either delist XRP entirely or restrict it for US users. The token that once held the number 2 position in global crypto rankings is suddenly at risk of being erased from American markets entirely. The timing of the lawsuit raises eyebrows. It is filed on December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas. In the final weeks of SEC Chairman Jay Clayton's tenure, Clayton had announced his departure earlier that month. Some observers note that Clayton would later go on to work in the crypto industry, raising questions about the motivations behind the 11th hour filing. For XRP holders, the fallout is personal. Millions of retail investors wake up to find their exchange accounts restricted, their positions frozen, and the token they believe in labeled as an illegal security by the US government. Online communities erupt. Some holders panic sell. Others, including many long-term believers, refuse to sell a single token. They hold through the crash, convinced that Ripple will win in court. But the SEC lawsuit is not just a threat to XRP's price. It is a direct attack on Ripple's entire business model. Every product, every partnership, every institutional relationship the company has built over 8 years now faces legal uncertainty. If XRP is ruled a security, the implications extend far beyond Ripple. It could set a precedent for how every digital asset in the United States is classified and regulated. The lawsuit also creates a competitive disadvantage. While Ripple fights a legal war in the US, competitors can operate freely. Other blockchain payment companies can sign deals with American banks that Ripple cannot. Every month the lawsuit drags on. Ripple loses ground in its home market. Ripple denies the allegations. Garlinghouse publicly states that the lawsuit is misguided and that Ripple will fight it in court. Unlike most companies targeted by the SEC in similar actions, Ripple does not settle. It prepares for a protracted legal battle. What follows over the next 2.5 years is the most closely watched court case in cryptocurrency history. Both sides file hundreds of pages of motions, briefs, and supporting documents. Discovery disputes drag on for months. The SEC resists releasing internal documents about how it classified other digital assets, particularly Ethereum, which SEC official William Hinman had publicly stated in 2018 was not a security. Ripple argues that the SEC's failure to provide clear guidance makes it impossible for any company to know what the rules are. One of the most contentious moments in the case involves the Hinman speech documents. In June 2018, then SEC Director of Corporation Finance William Hinman gave a speech suggesting that Ether was not a security. Ripple's legal team argues that if the SEC considered Ethereum, which also had a pre-sale and a founding team that received large token allocations, to be a non-security, then XRP should receive similar treatment. The SEC fights to keep Hinman's internal communications, emails, and drafts of the speech sealed, arguing they are protected by deliberative process privilege. The court ultimately orders the release of these documents, and they reveal internal disagreement within the SEC about the speech's legal implications. The case also features the fair notice defense. Ripple argues that even if XRP could theoretically be classified as a security under the Howey test, the SEC never gave Ripple fair notice that its XRP sales violated the law. Ripple points to the FinCEN settlement in 2015, where the government treated XRP as a convertible virtual currency, not a security. Ripple argues it was entitled to rely on that classification. The legal battle draws in amicus briefs from across the industry. Coinbase, the Blockchain Association, and other crypto organizations file briefs supporting Ripple's position. The case becomes a proxy war for the entire industry's relationship with U.S. regulators. Meanwhile, Ripple's business does not stop. In fact, the company does something unexpected. Rather than retreating, it pivots hard into international markets. With a U.S. regulatory environment hostile, Ripple doubles down on regions where its technology is welcomed. ODL corridors expand across the Philippines, Mexico, the UAE, Singapore, and Japan. Ripple opens new offices. It hires aggressively in international markets. It signs partnerships with central banks. Japan becomes a particularly important market. SBI Holdings, one of the country's largest financial conglomerates, becomes one of Ripple's strongest advocates. SBI Remit, the remittance arm of SBI Holdings, uses ODL for Japan-Philippines corridors, one of the highest volume remittance routes in Asia. The partnership gives Ripple a deep institutional foothold in the world's third largest economy. In the Middle East, Ripple partners with the National Bank of Kuwait, the Qatar National Bank, and the Saudi British Bank. These are not small fintech startups. They are among the largest and most established financial institutions in the Gulf region. Their adoption of Ripple's technology validates the company's enterprise strategy in a part of the world where cross-border payments are critical for the massive foreign worker population sending remittances home. In Southeast Asia, Ripple's ODL network handles growing transaction volumes between Thailand, the Philippines, and Japan. The corridors serve millions of migrant workers who depend on remittance services to support families in their home countries. For these users, the difference between a 3-day settlement and a 3-second settlement is not abstract. It is the difference between a family receiving money this week or next week. In 2021, Ripple launches CBDC pilot programs with 2 sovereign entities. The Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan partners with Ripple to explore how the XRP ledger could support a digital version of the Ngultram, Bhutan's national currency. The goal is to promote financial inclusion in a country where much of the population lacks access to traditional banking. In the Republic of Palau, Ripple works on developing a US dollar-backed digital currency. This pilot does not use XRP directly but leverages Ripple's underlying technology for the settlement layer. These CBDC partnerships are strategically important. They demonstrate that Ripple's technology is being considered not just by commercial banks, but by sovereign governments. Central bank digital currencies are one of the hottest topics in global finance, and Ripple is positioning itself as an infrastructure provider for this emerging sector. Back in the US, the legal battle grinds forward. But on July 13, 2023, a ruling changes everything. U.S. District Judge Annalisa Torres delivers a landmark decision in the SEC versus Ripple case. The ruling distinguishes between how XRP is sold and whether it qualifies as a security. On programmatic sales, meaning when XRP is bought and sold by ordinary users on public cryptocurrency exchanges, Judge Torres rules that these transactions do not violate securities laws. The reasoning is that retail buyers on exchanges do not know who they are buying from. They are not entering into an investment contract with Ripple. They are simply purchasing a digital asset on the open market. However, the judge also rules that XRP can be considered a security when sold directly to institutional investors under certain conditions. In those cases, Ripple had marketed XRP with the expectation that its efforts would increase the token's value, which meets the Howey test criteria. The ruling is not a clean sweep for Ripple. But the part that matters most to the market, that XRP is not a security when traded on public exchanges, is a massive win. XRP's price jumps more than 70% in a single day. Coinbase, Kraken, Bitstamp, and other major exchanges that had suspended XRP trading begin relisting the token. The regulatory cloud that had hung over XRP for more than 2 years starts to lift. The ruling also establishes legal precedent. For the first time, a U.S. federal court draws a clear line between how a digital asset is sold and whether it is a security. This distinction gives the broader crypto industry a framework to work with, something projects and investors had been demanding from regulators for years. While the lawsuit consumes public attention, the XRP ledger itself continues evolving. By 2023 and into 2024, the XRPL introduces several technical upgrades that expand its capabilities far beyond payments. The ledger adds native NFT support. Unlike Ethereum, where NFTs rely on smart contracts, the XRP ledger builds NFT functionality directly into the core protocol. Users can mint, trade, and interact with NFTs on the XRPL without external dependencies. Transactions are fast, fees are minimal, and the system can handle high volumes. The XRPL also introduces sidechain support. Sidechains allow developers to build experimental features, applications, and use cases without compromising the performance or security of the main network. Think of it as adding extra lanes to a highway without disrupting existing traffic. Sidechains enable use cases ranging from DeFi applications to regulated asset issuance. Then come hooks, a lightweight alternative to full smart contracts. Hooks allow developers to attach logic directly to XRPL accounts, enabling automated payments, on-ledger voting, conditional transactions, and countless other use cases. They are not as complex as Ethereum's smart contracts, but they are fast, efficient, and natively integrated into the ledger. These upgrades signal a shift. The XRP ledger is no longer defined solely as a payments network. It is becoming a programmable, multi-purpose blockchain capable of supporting a broad range of financial applications. In February 2026, Ripple launches a permissioned decentralized exchange on the XRP ledger that allows regulated financial institutions to trade on-chain while maintaining compliance requirements. XRP serves as the auto-bridge asset for every trade on this DEX, and data shows 92% of all DEX trades flow through XRP. On December 17, 2024, Ripple launches RLUSD, its US dollar-denominated stablecoin. The launch comes after the New York Department of Financial Services grants regulatory approval. RLUSD is issued by Standard Custody and Trust Company, a Ripple subsidiary operating under a New York Limited Purpose Trust Company charter. Each RLUSD token is backed one-to-one by US dollar deposits, US government bonds, and cash equivalents. Ripple publishes monthly third-party attestations of its reserve assets. The stablecoin launches on both the XRP ledger and Ethereum, giving it access to fast cross-border settlements on XRPL and deep DeFi liquidity on Ethereum. Initial exchange partners include Uphold, Bitso, MoonPay, Arcax, and CoinMina, with Bitstamp, bullish, and others following in the weeks after. Ripple assembles a high-profile advisory board for RLUSD that includes Sheila Bair, former chair of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Raghuram Rajan, former governor of the Reserve Bank of India, and Kenneth Montgomery, former first vice president and COO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. The stablecoin market at the time of launch is dominated by Tether's USDT and Circle's USDC, which together hold about 90% of total stablecoin market share. Ripple enters this market with a compliance-first strategy, betting that institutional users will choose a stablecoin issued under one of the strictest regulatory frameworks in the world. By November 2025, RLUSD crosses $1 billion in market cap. By March 2026, it reaches $1.55 billion, making it the third largest U.S.-regulated stablecoin. Ripple integrates RLUSD into its payments business, Ripple Payments, which has processed over $100 billion in payment volume across more than 60 markets. In November 2025, Ripple launches a pilot with MasterCard, WebBank, and Gemini to settle credit card transactions using RLUSD on the XRP ledger. This is the first time a major payment network uses a stablecoin for credit card settlement on a public blockchain. On August 7, 2025, the SEC versus Ripple lawsuit officially ends. The SEC and Ripple file a joint stipulation of dismissal with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, voluntarily dropping their respective appeals. Each side bears its own legal costs. The filing locks in Judge Torres' 2023 summary judgment as the final word. Programmatic sales of XRP on exchanges are not securities. Institutional sales, under certain conditions, are. The final penalty stands at $125 million, exactly as set in the 2024 remedies order. This is a fraction of the SEC's original demand of $2 billion. Ripple also faces a permanent injunction against future violations of Section 5 of the Securities Act of 1933 related to institutional sales. With the legal cloud cleared, the market responds. XRP had already been climbing in anticipation of the resolution, reaching an all-time high of $3.65 in July 2025. The formal closure of the case provides the regulatory clarity that institutional investors have been waiting for. The timing is not accidental. The end of the lawsuit coincides with a shift in U.S. regulatory policy. President Trump signs the Genius Act, the Generating Enhanced National Infrastructure for Unprecedented Stablecoins Act, into law in July 2025. This legislation establishes a clear federal framework for stablecoin issuers in the United States, providing the legal foundation for crypto-native companies to operate within the traditional banking system. A new SEC leadership team, appointed in 2025 under Chairman Paul Atkins, introduces revised guidance and simplified approval processes for blockchain projects and digital asset funds. The enforcement-heavy approach of the previous administration gives way to what regulators describe as a charter-based model. With the lawsuit behind it, Ripple goes on the most aggressive acquisition spree in cryptocurrency history. In April 2025, Ripple announces the acquisition of Hidden Road, a global multi-asset prime broker, for $1.25 billion. Hidden Road clears over $3 trillion annually across foreign exchange, derivatives, fixed income, and digital assets. The deal makes Ripple the first crypto company to own and operate a global prime broker. The acquisition closes in October 2025. Hidden Road is rebranded as Ripple Prime. Institutional clients gain direct access to Ripple's digital ecosystem, including the ability to use RLUSD as collateral for derivatives trading and settle transactions through the XRP ledger. Ripple does not stop there. In August 2025, the company acquires Rail, a Toronto-based stablecoin payments platform, for $200 million. In October, Ripple finalizes the purchase of G-Treasury, a corporate treasury management platform linked to major U.S. financial institutions, for approximately $1 billion. Ripple also acquires Palisade, a digital asset wallet and custody firm. In total, Ripple completes 4 acquisitions in 2025, worth nearly $4 billion. The company is no longer just a cross-border payments provider. It is building a full-stack enterprise infrastructure for digital finance, payments, custody, stablecoins, prime brokerage, and treasury management, all under one roof. The strategy is clear. Ripple is positioning itself to serve institutional clients across the entire life cycle of a financial transaction. A bank or asset manager can now use Ripple for clearing, settlement, custody, treasury management, and cross-border payments, all connected to the XRP ledger and RLUSD. In November 2025, Ripple raises $500 million at a valuation of $40 billion. The investment round is led by funds managed by affiliates of Fortress Investment Group and affiliates of Citadel Securities, alongside Pantera Capital, Galaxy Digital, Brevin Howard, and Marshall Wace. This is one of the largest private funding rounds in crypto history. Ripple's president, Monica Long, states publicly that the company has no plans to pursue an initial public offering, preferring to remain private. She argues that Ripple does not need the liquidity or capital access that typically drives IPO decisions. The $40 billion valuation makes Ripple one of the most valuable private companies in the United States and the most valuable private crypto company in the world. The resolution of the SEC case clears the path for something the crypto industry has been waiting years to see: spot XRP exchange-traded funds trading on American exchanges. The first spot XRP ETF launches on November 13, 2025, when Canary Capital's XRPC begins trading on NASDAQ. The company uses the auto-effective registration process under Section 8 of the Securities Act, triggering a 20-day window for automatic approval. Other issuers follow rapidly. By December 2025, 5 spot XRP ETF products have secured exchange approval. Franklin Templeton lists its XRPZ fund. Bitwise launches its XRP ETF on NYSE. Grayscale converts its existing XRP trust into a spot ETF 2-1. Shares receive SIBO BZX exchange approval for its TOXR fund. Rex Osprey's XRPR is also trading. The ETFs go 35 consecutive trading days without a single net outflow after launching, a streak that neither Bitcoin nor Ethereum ETFs matched at their launches. By December 2025, cumulative inflows approach $1.15 billion. Futures-based XRP ETFs had already been trading since April 2025. The 2-Cryum 2x long daily XRP ETF, trading under the ticker XXRP, launches first and attracts over $300 million in assets. ProShares follows with leveraged and inverse XRP products. The combination of futures and spot ETFs gives American investors multiple regulated ways to gain exposure to XRP through traditional brokerage and retirement accounts. Goldman Sachs emerges as one of the largest buyers of XRP ETF shares. On December 12, 2025, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency announces conditional approval for Ripple to establish the Ripple National Trust Bank, a federally supervised trust bank. The OCC approval comes after the passage of the Genius Act. The National Trust Bank Charter allows Ripple to manage RLUSD reserves under direct federal oversight, adding a layer of regulation on top of the existing state-level oversight from the New York Department of Financial Services. Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse calls the approval a massive step forward and describes the resulting dual layer of federal and state regulation as something no other stablecoin issuer can claim. The OCC grants similar conditional approvals on the same day to Circle for USDC, BitGo, Fidelity Digital Assets, and Paxos. But the approvals are controversial. Traditional banking industry groups, including the American Bankers Association, the Bank Policy Institute, and the Independent Community Bankers of America, argue that the charters give crypto firms a backdoor into the banking system with lighter regulatory standards. OCC Comptroller Jonathan Gould responds that new entrants into the federal banking sector are good for consumers and the economy, providing access to new products and services. By early 2026, Ripple is operating at a scale that would have been unimaginable just 3 years earlier. On March 17, 2026, two events happen on the same day. Ripple announces its biggest single-country expansion ever, launching 5 integrated products in Brazil: payments, custody, stablecoins, prime brokerage, and treasury management. 6 major Brazilian financial institutions, including one of the country's largest foreign exchange banks, are already live on the platform. Ripple applies for a virtual asset service provider license with Brazil's central bank. Also, on March 17th, the SEC and CFTC issue a joint final rule classifying XRP as a digital commodity alongside 15 other crypto assets. This is binding regulation, stronger than staff guidance, and provides the clearest legal classification XRP has ever received in the United States. But there is an important distinction. The joint rule is a regulatory action. It is not federal law. A future administration could reinterpret it. That is why attention now turns to the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, a bill that passed the House of Representatives with strong bipartisan support in July 2025 with a vote of 294 to 134. The Clarity Act would codify XRP's commodity status into federal law, providing permanent legal clarity that cannot be reversed by a change in SEC or CFTC leadership. The bill is stalled in the Senate over a dispute about whether crypto platforms should be allowed to offer yield on stablecoin holdings. Analysts give it between 56 and 90% odds of passing by April 2026. In Brazil, the expansion is substantial. Ripple Payments has processed over $100 billion globally across more than 60 markets. Ripple Custody is live, and 2 Brazilian companies are already using it to tokenize real-world assets on the XRP ledger. CRX has settled nearly $100 million in tokenized assets on-chain. JustToken has tokenized over $1.7 billion in natural resources assets on XRPL. Brasa Bank's BBRL stablecoin, a Brazilian real-denominated token, uses XRP as a bridge currency on the XRP ledger's built-in decentralized exchange. This is exactly the use case Ripple has been building toward for over a decade, and it is now operational at scale in one of the world's largest emerging market economies. RLUSD ties the Brazil operation together. It has crossed $1.55 billion in market cap and is listed on major Brazilian exchanges including Mercado, Bitcoin, and Foxbit. Deutsche Bank, Aviva Investors, and Societe Generale all began using Ripple's technology in February 2026, adding 3 major European financial institutions to the company's growing client list. So where does XRP stand right now? In March 2026, XRP trades around $1.50. The token is down about 60% from its all-time high of $3.65 set in July 2025. The decline is not XRP specific. The broader crypto market has been under pressure throughout early 2026 due to rising oil prices after Israeli strikes on Iran's South Pars gas facility, which pushed Brent crude above $95. The February Producer Price Index came in at 0.7%, more than double expectations. The Federal Reserve held rates at 3.5 to 3.75% in March and raised its 2026 inflation forecast to 2.7%. Futures markets have pushed the first expected rate cut to December at the earliest. Bitcoin and XRP move with a 0.84 correlation. When Bitcoin falls, XRP falls harder, swinging roughly 1.8 times in either direction. The macro environment in 2026 has been difficult for all risk assets, not just crypto. But the fundamentals tell a different story. Ripple as a company is valued at $40 to $50 billion. It owns a global prime broker. It has a federally chartered trust bank pending final approval. Its stablecoin has crossed $1.5 billion in market cap. 7 spot ETFs hold over $1.4 billion in combined assets. The SEC and CFTC have classified XRP as a digital commodity, and Ripple's payments network reaches over 90% of the global FX market. The gap between Ripple's corporate growth and XRP's price performance is one of the defining tensions in crypto right now. Critics argue that Ripple keeps winning while the token keeps falling. Supporters counter that the institutional infrastructure being built will eventually translate into sustained demand for XRP as a bridge currency and settlement asset, but that macro conditions and trader psychology need to cooperate first. About 60% of all XRP holders are currently sitting on unrealized losses, which creates a wall of selling pressure at every price level between $1.44 and $3.65. Every time XRP rallies, holders who bought at higher prices sell to break even. Until that overhang clears, sustained price recovery will be difficult. There is a disconnect that many people find frustrating. Ripple as a company has never been stronger. It is valued at $40 billion. It processes over $100 billion in payments. It owns a prime broker. It has a national trust bank charter. Major European banks are using its technology. 7 ETFs trade on American exchanges. The SEC classified XRP as a commodity. Yet, the price of XRP sits at $1.50. Ripple's president, Monica Long, its CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, and its CTO, David Schwartz, all continue to operate as though the token and the company are separate stories, and in some ways, they are. Ripple's revenue comes from payments, custody, and prime brokerage fees, not from the price of XRP. But the token remains central to the ecosystem because it serves as the bridge currency for ODL transactions and the auto-bridge asset on the XRPL's decentralized exchange. The question for XRP holders is whether this infrastructure translates into sustained demand for the token. And the honest answer is that it depends on factors outside Ripple's control. The macro environment, Federal Reserve policy, oil prices, geopolitical risk, and whether Congress passes the Clarity Act. Here is what to watch going forward. The Clarity Act is the single biggest catalyst. If it passes the Senate by the end of April, analysts project XRP could reach $5 to $10 as institutional capital flows in at scale. Standard Chartered originally set an $8 target for 2026 based on the bill passing, projecting $4 to $8 billion in total ETF inflows by year-end. Without the Clarity Act, their revised target is $2.80. The bill passed the House 294 to 134. It is stalled in the Senate Banking Committee over a single issue: whether crypto platforms should be allowed to offer yield on stablecoin holdings. Banks argue this creates an unlevel playing field. The crypto industry says the Genius Act deliberately left the door open for this. Galaxy Digital analyst Alex Thorne has set a hard deadline. The bill must clear committee by end of April, or it is likely dead for 2026 because midterm election season will consume all congressional attention. Polymarket currently puts the odds of passage at 56 to 72%. Ripple CEO Garlinghouse puts it at 90% by April. The gap between those assessments reflects genuine uncertainty in the final Senate negotiations. BlackRock has not yet filed for an XRP ETF. Canary Capital CEO Stephen McClurg expects BlackRock could file by late 2026 or early 2027 if current trends in XRP ETF adoption continue. 6 asset managers currently offer U.S. spot XRP ETFs: Franklin Templeton, Canary Capital, Bitwise, Grayscale, 2-1 Shares, and Rex Osprey, with combined assets of roughly $1 billion. These funds went 35 consecutive trading days without a single outflow after launching, a streak neither Bitcoin nor Ethereum ETFs matched. But BlackRock's entry, with its $11 trillion under management and massive distribution network, would be a different order of magnitude. The Ripple National Trust Bank is pending final OCC approval. Once operational, it will handle RLUSD reserves under federal supervision and provide custody and fiduciary services to institutional clients. The bank will be subject to the same regulatory standards as the roughly 60 other national trust banks the OCC supervises. Ripple is also applying for a Federal Reserve master account, which would allow XRP to be integrated directly into U.S. payment infrastructure and used by Tier 1 banks for cross-border settlement. This is a longer-term development, but if approved, it would place XRP at the center of the American financial system in a way that no other cryptocurrency has achieved. Then, there is the competitive landscape. Ripple does not operate in a vacuum. Stellar, the project born from Ripple's own internal split, still competes in similar corridors with a similar pitch. Stablecoin giants like Tether and Circle are expanding their own payment networks. Visa and PayPal are building settlement infrastructure that overlaps with Ripple's use case. CBDCs from central banks around the world could either complement or compete with XRP's bridge currency function. And SWIFT itself has been upgrading its technology, launching instant cross-border payment pilots that aim to close the speed gap Ripple has exploited for a decade. This is the complete story of XRP. From a community IOU system in Vancouver in 2004 to a federally recognized digital commodity backed by a $40 billion company with a national trust bank charter, 7 ETFs, and a stablecoin processing billions in payments. 22 years of development. A co-founder war that split the project and spawned a competitor. An 8-year token sell-off worth $3.2 billion. A $700,000 FinCEN fine that set the pattern for Ripple's compliance-first approach. A bull run that produced 35,000% returns and briefly made XRP the second largest cryptocurrency on Earth. A 90% crash that wiped out hundreds of billions in value. The most aggressive SEC enforcement action in crypto history, fought in court for nearly 5 years. A landmark ruling that distinguished between retail and institutional sales of a digital asset for the first time. $4 billion in acquisitions in a single year. A stablecoin that crossed $1 billion in market cap in under 12 months. Conditional approval for a national trust bank. And a joint secant CFTC classification as a digital commodity. Every chapter of XRP's history has produced people who said the project was finished. When McCaleb left and threatened to dump 9 billion tokens, people said XRP was finished. When FinCEN fined Ripple, people said it was finished. When the 2017 bubble burst and XRP lost 90% of its value, people said it was finished. When the SEC filed its lawsuit and exchanges delisted XRP across America, people said it was finished. Every single time, the people who said that were wrong. That does not mean the price goes up forever or that there are no risks. Macro conditions, regulatory setbacks, competitive threats, and the persistent gap between Ripple's corporate success and XRP's token performance are all real concerns. Investing in any cryptocurrency carries substantial risk, and past performance does not predict future results. But the infrastructure is built. The regulatory clarity exists. The institutional partnerships are live. And the technology is operational across more than 60 countries, processing real payments for real financial institutions. The XRP story did not start in 2017 when the price exploded, and it did not end in 2020 when the SEC filed its lawsuit. It started in 2004 with a simple idea about people exchanging value directly with each other. And it is still being written right now, in courtrooms, in bank boardrooms, in congressional hearing rooms, and on the XRP ledger itself, where millions of transactions settle every day. If you made it to the end of this video, you now know more about XRP than the vast majority of people in this space. If this was helpful, consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who holds XRP but does not know the full story. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.